Well, howdy folks. Let me tell you something. It cost me exactly $1,478 in broken mailboxes. Plus I got hit with over $5,000 in totally fake HOA fines. All before I finally decided to stop playing Karen's game. I was done. So I built a mailbox. But not just any mailbox. I used a dusty 40-year-old map and a forgotten law that nobody knew about. Not even Karen and her whole HOA gang. That's when the fun really started. I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. What's the craziest thing an HOA ever tried to do in your neighborhood? And stick around. I'm going to show you exactly how we used their own rulebook against them. How we made their little kingdom come crashing down. Go ahead and tell me where you're watching from tonight. No, alright. Settle in. For those of you new to the channel, my name is Frank. If there's one thing I believe, it's this. Measure twice. And cut once. I spent 40 years as a civil engineer living by that rule. It's about planning, being careful, and doing a job right the first time so you don't have to worry about it again. Was ready to use that same thinking for my retirement. My wife Sarah and I had finally done it. We saved enough money to buy our forever home. Not a mansion or anything fancy. Just a nice solid house on 3 acres of land just outside of town. It had old oak trees. Enough room for a garden that could feed a small army. And the kind of peace and quiet that makes you forget the highway even exists. We called it our slice of heaven. Turns out that slice of heaven came with a tiny string attached. A string so small you could barely see it. Our house was technically part of a newer neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. And that string had a name. Brenda was the president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. From the moment we met her at a welcome barbecue, I knew we were in for trouble. She was a woman in her mid-60s. She drove a white Lexus SUV. She wore tennis hats indoors. She had that particular look, you know the one. The kind that sizes you up, finds you wanting, and judges you all in 1 second. Our property with its old school charm was clearly a problem for her perfect little community. Most of the Willow Creek homes were exactly the same. Nice, but built on tiny lots. Our place was different. Brenda walked over to us holding a plate with one sad-looking brownie on it. She said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "It must be so much work trying to bring an older lot like this up to Willow Creek standards. Not welcome to the neighborhood." A backhanded insult. That was Brenda's opening shot. The first real battle was over the mailbox. Our property didn't have one. So I went to the hardware store, bought a standard post office approved box and a strong wooden post. I spent a Saturday digging the hole, mixing concrete, and setting it just right. Smell of fresh mulch around the base was the smell of success. The final thump of my hand on the post to check if it was solid was me saying, "This is our home." A week later, we came home from grocery shopping. The mailbox was completely destroyed. Just flattened. There were wide tire tracks in the soft dirt. Clear as day. The post was snapped. The box was a crumpled mess. Its little red flag was bent into a sad metal question mark. "Teenagers," Sarah said with a sigh. I figured she was right. Just random damage. Annoying, but it happens anywhere. So with a deep breath and a few words my wife pretended not to hear, I got out my tools. The screaming screech of that twisted metal post as I pulled it from the concrete was the real start of this whole mess. I just didn't know it yet. So I built a second mailbox. Went through the whole thing again. New post, new box, mixed another bag of concrete. This time I used bolts to attach the post to the foundation. I figured it would be easier to replace if lightning or teenagers struck again. I made it stronger, straighter, and better than the last one. I even painted the post a nice forest green to match our house trim. It looked sharp. Too sharp, apparently. 2 days later, there was a crisp cream-colored envelope in our front door mail slot. It had the Willow Creek Estates logo on top. It wasn't a welcome note. It was a formal violation notice. I can still picture it. For the Willow Creek Rules, Article 4, Section 2A. All mailbox posts must be painted ecological beige, Pantone 7527C. The post currently installed uses forest green, which breaks our rules. A fine of $50 has been charged to your account. Please fix this violation within 15 days to avoid more penalties. Ecological beige. A color so bland, so totally without personality, it could only have been thought up by a committee. It was the color of weak coffee, of dusty office cubicles, of giving up. It was without a doubt the ugliest color I had ever been legally forced to use. Sarah just laughed and said, "Don't let her get to you." But it wasn't about the color. It was about being told what to do on my own property by a woman whose only joy in life seemed to be making others miserable. Still, I was trying to be the good neighbor, the reasonable man. So I sighed, drove to the paint store, had them mix up a quart of this beige horror. I spent a Saturday morning carefully painting the post. Every brush stroke felt like a little piece of my soul was dying. I took a picture of the finished product, emailed it with a sickeningly sweet note to the HOA management company, proved my compliance. The mailbox looked pathetic, like it was embarrassed to even exist. You can guess what happened next. The following Tuesday, we came home to find the beige mailbox flattened, smashed with the same deliberate car attack as the first one. Only this time, as I was kneeling in the dirt examining the broken wood, something caught my eye. A tiny fleck of pearl-white paint stuck right in the wood grain. It was small, no bigger than my pinky nail, but it was unmistakable. It was the exact shade of Brenda's pristine Lexus SUV. And that's when everything changed. This wasn't random. This wasn't teenagers. This was a declaration of war. My blood started to boil. But an engineer doesn't let anger control his actions. Anger is messy. Data is clean. I needed proof. So instead of marching over to her house, I drove to a sporting goods store. I walked out with an $80 trail camera, the kind hunters use to spot deer. That evening, just as the sun was setting, I went across the street. There was a big old oak tree on the edge of the common area, one with a perfect view of where my mailbox would go. I strapped the camera to it, hid it with a few branches, set it to record when something moved. The almost silent click of the camera as I tested, it was the sound of a trap being set. Then, for the third time, I went to the hardware store. I bought the exact same mailbox, the exact same post. I bolted it back onto the concrete base. And with grim satisfaction, I painted it the ugliest, most compliant shade of ecological beige you have ever seen. And then I waited. The ball was in her court. Now it didn't take long. Less than a week. I'd gotten into the habit of checking the trail camera's memory card every morning, feeling like a spy in my own neighborhood. And then one morning, there it was. The video was grainy, stamped with the time. 2:17 a.m. shot in. That spooky black and white night vision that makes the world look like a ghost story. But what I saw was crystal clear. A familiar white Lexus SUV, the same one I saw Brenda driving every single day. It slowed as it got close to my property. Then it made a sharp, deliberate turn, drove its front passenger wheel right over my mailbox with a violent crunch, then straightened out and drove off into the night without even slowing down. You couldn't see the driver through the glare on the windshield, but you didn't need to. I had the vehicle, the action, and the time. I saved the video to a thumb drive, put the white paint chip in a little plastic bag, and felt a surge of righteous energy. This Was it? Game, set, match. The next HOA board meeting was held in the community center's sad little conference room. It smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Brenda and her two board cronies, a woman who looked permanently surprised and a man who looked permanently asleep, were sitting at the front table. I waited patiently through 20 minutes of debate about the acceptable height of garden gnomes before my turn came. I stood up, calm and collected. I have evidence regarding the repeated destruction of my property, I began. I explained the timeline, the 3 mailboxes, the cost. Then I held up the paint chip. I found this at the scene of the second incident. Finally, I pulled out my laptop. And I have video of the third incident. I played the clip. The board members leaned in. They watched the white SUV deliberately smash my mailbox. When it finished, I looked right at Brenda. The room was silent. She didn't flinch. She scoffed. That could be any white SUV, she said, waving a dismissive hand. There are dozens of cars that look like that in this county. Are you accusing me, Frank? In a public meeting? This feels like targeted harassment. The sleepy-looking man, who was the board's treasurer, chimed in. The video is inconclusive. It's blurry. We can't act on speculation or circumstantial evidence. They refused to look at it again. They thanked me for my time and dismissed my claim entirely. The system wasn't just broken. It was a fortress designed to protect its queen. I walked out of that room, stunned. The counterpunch came 2 days later. Delivered via certified mail. It was a letter from the board. Not only were they not going to do anything, they were fining me $500 for failure to maintain property in good repair, citing my now destroyed third mailbox, and another $250 for installing an unapproved surveillance device on what they considered HOA common property, the tree across the street. That's when the engineer in me shut down, and the angry Texan took over for about 5 minutes. Then the engineer came back online. Angrier than before, but with a purpose. If their rulebook was a weapon against me, I needed to find a bigger rulebook. And I found one. I spent an entire night fueled by coffee and anger, digging through city codes, county laws, and finally federal regulations. And there it was. Knowledge nugget number 1. USPS Postal Operations Manual. Section DMM 5008. It details the rules and regulations for mailboxes. Buried in the legal language is the core principle. Mailboxes are considered federal property. The USPS has specific rules governing their construction, placement, and access to ensure the security and efficiency of mail delivery. The takeaway: federal law protecting mail delivery often supersedes the aesthetic whims of a local HOA. The next morning, I drafted a polite but ice-cold letter. I quoted the specific federal regulation. I stated that their repeated actions and subsequent fines constituted active interference with the delivery of United States mail, which I noted was a federal offense. I attached a copy of my bill for the third mailbox. And at the bottom, under my signature, I added 2 little letters that change everything in a fight like this. CCI sent a copy of the entire package to the regional postmaster general. Let's see how Brenda's little board deals with a letter from the federal government. Playing the federal card worked like a charm for a while. About a week after I sent my letter, I logged into my account on the HOA's clunky web portal. The $750 in fines had simply vanished. No email. No letter of apology. No acknowledgement whatsoever. They were just gone. Wiped from the record as if they'd never existed. But the war was far from over. It just went cold. The temperature in the neighborhood dropped by about 30 degrees. Brenda stopped making eye contact. Instead, whenever she'd drive by, she'd give our house a long, slow Calculating stare. It was the kind of look a coyote gives a sheepdog. She was respecting the fence for now, but she was also looking for a hole in it. The air was thick with tension you could cut with a knife. I hadn't won. I just forced a stalemate. I figured if I'd won the legal battle for the moment, it was time to win the physical one for good. I'm an engineer, for crying out loud. If I can't build a mailbox that can withstand a suburban SUV, I ought to turn in my degree. So I drew up some plans. This wasn't going to be another wooden post. This was going to be a monument to stubbornness. I spent the next weekend on what I privately called the Fort Knox project. I bought a heavy-duty galvanized steel mailbox, the kind you see in rural areas that have to survive snowplows. Then I bought 24 bags of concrete mix, rebar, and a pallet of red bricks that closely matched our house. I built a form, poured a massive new concrete foundation, and then, with the patience of a man who has nothing but time, I started laying brick. I hadn't done masonry work in years, but it came back to me. The distinct smell of wet mortar filled the air, a scent of creation and permanence. The satisfying slick of the trowel as I smoothed the joints was music to my ears. Built a 2-foot by 2-foot column of solid brick and mortar, encasing the new steel mailbox in a shell of pure immovable mass. When I was done, it looked less like a mailbox and more like a guard tower for a miniature prison. It was beautiful. I stood back, covered in dust and sweat, and thought, all right, Brenda, let's see you try to run this one over. But she didn't. That was the genius of her next move. She didn't even try. A few days after the project was complete, I saw her white Lexus parked across the street. She wasn't driving by. She was stopped. She just sat there for a moment, then slowly lifted her phone and took several pictures from different angles. Then she drove off. No drama. No confrontation. And honestly, it was more unsettling than finding it smashed. A week later, a shiny white truck pulled up to my curb. But this one wasn't a Lexus. It had the official seal of the County Public Works Department on the door. A man, in a hard hat and a high-visibility vest, got out holding a clipboard. He was polite, professional, and the bearer of my doom. "Sir," he said, not unkindly, "we've had a complaint filed about an unpermitted structure in the county right-of-way." My heart sank. He explained that while the mailbox itself was fine, the massive brick column I'd built around was technically a structure. And since that structure was located within the first 20 feet of my property line, it was sitting in the county's legal right-of-way. It violated Municipal Code 114B. Brenda hadn't used the HOA rules. She'd gone over my head using a higher and more legitimate authority. She had weaponized the county against me. I was handed a formal notice. I had 14 days to demolish my beautiful, indestructible fortress at my own expense. If I failed to comply, the county would do it for me and send me the bill along with daily fines and a potential lien against my property. Had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. I stood there holding the demolition order, staring at my brick masterpiece. It was a monument not to my stubbornness, but to my failure. I was out hundreds more dollars, publicly defeated, and right back at square one. It was the lowest I'd felt in this whole affair. I had lost, was sitting in my small home office staring at the pile of documents that represented my failure, the receipts for 4 mailboxes, the bogus HOA violation notices, and sitting right on top, the official demolition order from the county. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, and everything felt heavy. Sarah came in and put a hand on my shoulder. She looked at the mess on my desk, then at me. "Honey," she said, her voice soft and full of reason. "This is insane. This woman is obsessed with you. Let's just give up on the mailbox. We can rent a PO box in town. It's not worth the stress. Please. She was right. Of course. Any logical person would have thrown in the towel. But as I looked at that demolition order, something inside me hardened. It wasn't about the mailbox anymore. It was about being bullied. It was about this woman thinking she could just roll over anyone who didn't fit into her perfect little world. This was our home. Our forever home. And I'll be damned if I was going to be run off my own land by a tyrant in a tennis visor. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm not letting her win. Not like this. That rejection of defeat lit a different kind of fire. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was on a mission. If I couldn't win by building, I would win by reading. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the big, bulky accordion file from when we closed on the house. It was packed with every piece of paper you could imagine. Title, reports, home inspections, loan documents, and the thickest, most intimidating document of them all, the original covenants, conditions and restrictions for Willow Creek Estates. Dated 1984. I dumped the whole thing on the dining room table and started digging. For hours, I read through mind-numbing legal language. Then at the very back of the file I found it. Tucked inside a folded, legal-sized envelope was the original, full-size plat map of the subdivision. It was a proper blueprint, the kind I used to work with every day. Full of surveyor's marks and precise measurements. It was old. The paper was crinkly, and the blue lines were faded. But it was clear. And that's when I saw it. I grabbed my old engineer scale ruler, the kind I hadn't used in years. The newer, simplified maps the HOA used just showed a solid property line. But this original map showed a thin dotted line running parallel to the road, set back deep inside my property. It was labeled 15-foot utility access easement. My heart started hammering. In my chest, I scrambled back to the CC and RS and found the corresponding article. The words practically leaped off the page. First, the easement, a 15-foot deep strip of land, was designated for use by utility companies, including the U.S. Postal Service. Second, a clause I'd skimmed over a dozen times suddenly had new meaning. The HOA, not the individual homeowner, was legally responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of all such easements within the community. The implications hit me like a ton of bricks. 1. The very ground my mailbox sat on. The ground Brenda kept. Destroying was land the HOA was supposed to be maintaining. 2. The fines they levied against me for failure to maintain were completely fraudulent. They were fining me for not taking care of their responsibility. And the kill shot. Any structure related to a public utility, like a U.S. mailbox, built within that easement fell under the jurisdiction of municipal utility codes, not the HOA. Aesthetic bylaws. I had been fighting a war on her terms, in her territory. But the whole time I had been standing on ground that legally belonged to a different kingdom. I leaned back in my chair. The old documents spread before me like a battle plan. A slow, wide grin spread across my face. The game had just changed. That discovery of the easement flipped a switch in my head. I went from being a defender to an attacker. But a good engineer knows that for a complex project, you need a team of specialists. My first call was to my neighbor from down the street, a gentleman I only knew as Old Man Fitz. Fitz was a retired county surveyor, a man who was perpetually grumpy and hated the HOA and Brenda in particular with a passion that burned with the light of 1,000 suns. Walked him through the plat map. He squinted at it, pulled out a pair of dusty reading glasses, and then let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned, Frank," he grumbled, a rare smile cracking his face. "She's been harassing you over a patch of ground she's supposed to be mowing." He came over the next day with his old transit and tripod, took some measurements, hammered a wooden stake into the ground 15 feet from the road. "That's the line," he declared. Official. Next, I needed legal firepower. I wasn't going to make another mistake. I spent a day researching property lawyers and found a young woman named Alicia. Her firm's website had a whole section on battling overreaching hoe, as she was sharp. She worked on a flat fee basis. And during our video call, her eyes lit up when I explained the situation. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a giant slayer. We had a strategy session with Fitz patched in on speakerphone. Alicia laid out the plan, and it was a thing of beauty. "First," she said, her voice crisp and confident, "we stop being victims. We send them a bill." This was knowledge nugget number 2. Brenda's harassment caused damages on property the HOA is responsible for. So we draft a formal itemized invoice for the cost of all 4 mailboxes: the paint, the concrete, the bricks, your demolition costs, and your labor hours billed at a professional contractor's rate. We cite the specific CC&R clause making them responsible. The takeaway: you can often hold your HOA financially accountable for neglecting its maintenance duties as defined in your founding documents. Next, she continued, the permit for the new mailbox. We don't even talk to the HOA. This was knowledge nugget number 3. Fitz cackled on the phone. We are going to draft a permit application and submit it directly to the county planning and zoning office. And we're not just applying for a mailbox. Thanks to Fitz's involvement, we're applying to install a federally compliant mail access utility point and official property survey monument. By bundling it with an official survey marker registration, it becomes a municipal and utility matter, not a cosmetic one. The takeaway: legally classifying a project under a higher government authority can make petty HOA rules completely irrelevant. The final piece of the puzzle was the hardware. I called my old buddy Dave, a guy I used to work with who now owns a custom metal fabrication shop. "Dave," I said, "how would you like to build something that will make Alexis cry for its mommy?" Dave laughed. "Frank, you just made my day. Send me the specs." And the specs for what we called the Sentinel were glorious. The foundation would be a 4-foot deep, 3 by 3 foot hole filled with steel rebar and high-strength concrete. Set right into the top would be an official brass survey plaque provided by one of Fitz's contacts at the county. The mailbox itself would be a single welded piece of 1/4-inch thick plate steel, designed with an angled prow like an icebreaker ship. The purpose wasn't just to be strong. It was designed to transfer the full kinetic energy of an impact down into that massive concrete anchor, maximizing damage to whatever was stupid enough to hit it. And for the finishing touch, we planned a small raised garden bed around the base, filled with the thorniest, nastiest native succulents and pyracantha bushes I could find. A beautiful but painful welcome mat. The plan was set. The team was assembled. The war was about to begin for real. Our first moves were silent but surgically precise. Alicia sent the invoice for just over $3,000 to the HOA via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. There would be no claiming. It got lost. A day later, Fitz and I walked the finalized permit application into the county planning and zoning office. The clerk, a no-nonsense woman with formidable glasses, gave it a thorough review. She saw Fitz's surveyor stamp, the utility classification, the federal mail statutes Alicia had referenced, and she stamped it approved with a satisfying car-chunk. The only sign of our impending action was a single, lonely-looking orange flag on a wire stake that Fitz had planted in my lawn, marking the exact spot for the new survey monument. A quiet little declaration of intent. Would have paid good money to have seen Brenda's face when she signed for that certified letter. When she opened that envelope and saw a professional invoice billing her own HOA for her acts of vandalism, complete with itemized costs and labor, I imagine the color drained from her face. This wasn't a homeowner's complaint she could dismiss. In a rigged meeting, this was a legal and financial assault. Her authority, her control, and her budget were all being directly challenged. A cornered animal is a dangerous animal. Her first move was to try and fight fire with fire. She marched down to the county office herself to protest our permit. Alicia had warned me she might, and had already called the clerk's office to give them a heads-up. Brenda, accustomed to having her way, apparently launched into a tirade about how we were trying to build an unapproved monstrosity. The clerk, bless her bureaucratic heart, let her finish, then calmly explain the situation. The permit was not for a simple mailbox, but for a registered utility access point and survey marker. It was fully compliant with county and federal regulations, co-signed by a licensed surveyor, and as such, the HOA's aesthetic guidelines were not applicable. Her objection was noted and promptly dismissed. Checkmate. Blocked by the very system she had tried to weaponize against me, Brenda escalated to the last refuge of a desperate tyrant. She went nuclear on social media. That evening, a post appeared on the official Willow Creek Estates community Facebook page. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fear-mongering. "Dear neighbors," it began, the all-caps screaming from the screen. "I am so sad to have to be writing this. The new owner on Lot 1, Frank, is attempting to build an industrial eyesore on our beautiful, quiet street that violates the spirit of our community. When the board tried to work with him, he responded by suing our HOA. This means your dues will be going up to pay his legal fees. He is trying to lower our property values and intimidate your board. This is not the kind of neighbor Willow Creek wants or needs. We must stand together against this aggression." The post blew up. Sarah and I sat there scrolling through the comments. It was a digital civil war in miniature. "This is outrageous. We can't let him ruin our neighborhood," wrote one of Brenda's obvious cronies. "Will my dues really go up? I'm on a fixed income," wrote a genuinely worried older resident. But then there were others. "Hold on," wrote a guy from a few streets over. "All this over a mailbox? Brenda, didn't you make him repaint it 3 times? Maybe there's more to this story." Another chimed in. "Frank and Sarah have been nothing but nice. This seems like a personal vendetta." The battle lines were being drawn. Brenda had fired her shot, not at my mailbox but at my reputation. She was trying to isolate me, to turn me into a pariah before the first shovel of dirt was even turned. But looking at those few supportive comments, I realized something. She wasn't as powerful as she thought she was. Not everyone was drinking her Kool-Aid. The question was, who would show up for the final battle? Installation day arrived on a perfect, clear Tuesday morning, and we made sure it was a show. This wasn't just about building a mailbox. It was about making a public statement. It was our response to her Facebook smear campaign. At 8 a.m. sharp, Dave's fabrication truck rolled up, a small crane mounted on its flatbed. It was followed by a ready-mix concrete truck, its big drum slowly turning. The sounds of professional grade. Diesel engines rumbled through the quiet morning air of Willow Creek. Fitz was already there, wearing his official-looking surveyor's vest and looking immensely pleased with himself. Just as we'd hoped, the spectacle drew a crowd. The Facebook drama had turned our little construction project into must-see TV. Curtains twitched. People suddenly decided it was a great morning to do some gardening or walk their dogs, their paths taking them conveniently past my lawn. They stood in small groups, whispering, watching. This was exactly what we wanted. An audience. It didn't take long for the Queen to arrive. Brenda's white Lexus came screaming down the street and slammed to a halt, half on the asphalt, half on the grass. She jumped out, her phone already up and recording, her face a mask of pure fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, marching towards us. "This is unapproved. I forbid this. You're all being sued." Dave's crew, a bunch of guys who had seen it all, completely ignored her. Dave just took a slow sip of his coffee. I gave her a calm, simple nod. "Morning, Brenda. We have all the necessary permits." This only enraged her further. "Permits? I am the board. I am the authority here." She turned to my buddy Dave. "I will pay you double what he's paying you to pack up and leave right now." Dave just laughed. "Lady, I wouldn't build a birdhouse for you for all the tea in China. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're on a schedule." True to her word, her finger jabbing at her phone screen, she called the sheriff. "Yes, I need to report illegal destruction of property. There's a madman tearing up the neighborhood." 15 minutes later, 2 county sheriff's cruisers rolled up, lights off, but with an unmistakable air of authority. The neighbors leaned in, the tension palpable. This was the moment. The deputies got out, looking serious. They were young, professional, and not in the mood for games. One of them approached me. "Sir, we've received a complaint about unpermitted construction and destruction of property." I had a folder ready for this exact moment. I didn't argue or raise my voice. I simply handed it to him. "Good morning, officer. Here are our county-stamped permits, a copy of the registered plat map highlighting the public utility easement, and my lawyer's business card, just in case." The deputy took the folder and began to read. His partner watched, hand resting casually on his belt. I saw his eyebrows raise just a fraction. He read for a full minute, then looked over at the survey marker stake, at the professional crew, and then back at the documents. He nodded, then handed the folder to his partner, who gave it a similar review. He walked over to Brenda, who was standing there with a smug, triumphant look on her face. The look didn't last long. "Ma'am," the deputy said, his voice calm but firm, leaving no room for argument, "I've reviewed the permits. Not only is this work fully permitted by the county, but it's taking place within a registered utility easement to install an official survey monument. It is a legal and authorized construction project." Brenda's jaw dropped. "But, but I'm the HOA president. He's violating our rules." The deputy's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am, your HOA rules do not supersede county permits and federal utility regulations. This is a legitimate work site. In fact, if you continue to interfere with it, you could be charged with obstructing a permitted project. I need you to return to your vehicle and let these men do their job, now." In front of a dozen of our neighbors, Brenda was publicly and officially stripped of her power. She was speechless, sputtering. Her face turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pastel polo shirt. Humiliated, she turned without another word, got into her Lexus and sped away. I looked at Fitz, who gave me a slow, satisfied wink. Sentinel was going up. The Sentinel stood guard at the end of our driveway, a solid, dark, unmovable monument to winning the battle. Now it was time to win the war. The next monthly HOA meeting was standing room only. The public showdown with the sheriff had been the talk of the neighborhood, and everyone wanted to see the final act. The air in the community center was electric. Sarah and I walked in with Fitz, and we were met with nods and quiet smiles from people we barely knew. We weren't alone. We took our seats. A moment later, our lawyer Alicia walked in looking sharp and confident in a dark blazer, carrying a heavy-looking leather briefcase. She gave me a subtle nod and sat in the row behind us. The trap was set. Brenda and her two bored cronies sat at the front table looking flustered but defiant. They were wounded, but they still thought they held the power. Brenda banged the gavel. Order. The first item of new business is an emergency bylaw proposal 9C, regarding aesthetic and structural uniformity of mail receptacles. She launched into a prepared speech, her voice dripping with fake concern. She spoke of protecting our community's unique character, of preventing unsightly industrial structures, and of ensuring the safety of our residents from rogue construction. It was all aimed at me. A final desperate attempt to use the system to retroactively outlaw the Sentinel. She was about to call for a motion to vote. She never got the chance. I stood up. Point of order, Madame President. Every head in the room snapped towards me. Brenda glared. You are out of order, Frank. Actually, a crisp, clear voice cut through the room. He is not. Alicia stood up, briefcase in hand. My client has relevant information for the board to consider before any such vote can be taken. Alicia walked calmly to the front of the room. She opened her briefcase and pulled out 4 thick spiral-bound packets. She placed one in front of Brenda and one in front of each of the other 2 board members. She handed the 4th to the HOA's recording secretary. What is the meaning of this? Brenda stammered. Information, Alyssa said simply. I suggest you read it. The board members hesitantly opened the packets. I could see their faces change as they turned the first few pages. I knew what they were seeing because I had helped assemble it. The first document was our invoice for over $3,000, now stamped in bright red ink. 30 days past due notice of intent to file lien on HOA assets. The treasurer's eyes went wide. This was no longer a squabble. It was a threat to their solvency. The second document was a series of crystal-clear photographs taken by Fitz of the brand-new 6-foot-tall vinyl fence Brenda had just installed around her back patio. Next to the photos were highlighted excerpts from the CC and RS, the very ones she loved to quote, explicitly forbidding fences of that height and material. It was irrefutable proof of her own hypocrisy. The third document was the kill shot, a formal, legally vetted petition demanding the immediate recall of Brenda as president of the board, citing fiscal mismanagement for neglecting the easement, targeted harassment of a homeowner, and unequal enforcement of the covenants. And as the board members flipped through the pages, they saw the signatures. Page after page of them. We hadn't just gotten the 51% needed. We had signatures from over 60% of the homeowners in Willow Creek. And the final page, the cherry on top, was a handsomely printed letter on official letterhead from the Office of the U.S. Postmaster General for our region. It commended the design of my new mailbox for its superior security and durability, and noted it as a model of compliance with federal regulations. Brenda was silent, pale. She looked at the petition, at the dozens of names of her neighbors who had turned against her. The other board members, seeing the overwhelming support for the recall and the evidence of Brenda's own violations, began pushing their chairs back from the table, physically distancing themselves from her as if she were contagious. Before Brenda could even process it, a man I'd spoken to earlier stood up in the back of the room. I make a motion to hold the vote of no confidence and recall as submitted by petition right now. Seconded, yelled 3 people at once. A roar of "aye" filled the room. It was deafening. Brenda just sat there, gavel in hand. A queen in a kingdom that had already crumbled around her. The vote to recall Brenda wasn't just a landslide. It was unanimous. In the very room that had been her seat of power, she was rendered powerless. She didn't even stay for the rest of the meeting. She simply stood up, her face a blank mask of shock, and walked out. We never saw her at another meeting. 2 months later, a for sale sign went up in her yard. The white Lexus was gone, replaced by a moving truck. And then she was gone too. A new board was elected, led by the reasonable fellow who had called for the vote. Their first official act was to sign a check to me for the full amount on the invoice. Their second act was to go through the HOA's finances. They discovered Brenda had been hoarding a massive surplus, using it as a slush fund to pay the HOA management company that enforced her iron will. The new board fired that company and used the surplus to build the new playground the community had been asking for years. The sound of kids laughing replaced the sound of tense arguments. The neighborhood started to breathe again. And the Sentinel? Well, it became something of a local legend. It stands there at the end of my driveway, dark and silent. It's got a few small dings in it, not from vehicles, but from what the delivery guys tell me are kids tapping it for good luck on their way to school. People point it out when they give directions. Turn left at the indestructible mailbox, they'll say. It's a landmark. A quiet symbol that you don't have to roll over and play dead just because a bully has a title. With the money from the paid invoice, Alicia and I decided to pay it forward. We started the Homeowner Advocacy Project. Twice a year we hold a free workshop at the public library. I bring my old plat maps and talk about the importance of knowing your property. Alicia explains in plain English how to read your CC and RS and use parliamentary procedure in board meetings. We teach people how to fight back, not with anger, but with knowledge. It's the best money I ever made. Sometimes in the evening, Sarah and I will sit on the porch. I'll see neighbors out for a walk, stop and chat with each other right there by the mailbox. The very thing that caused so much division is now a point of connection. I finally have what I wanted all along: peace and quiet. I learned that it wasn't really about the mailbox at all. It was about the simple fundamental right to be left alone and enjoy your own home, your own little slice of heaven. We fought for our peace, and in the end, the whole neighborhood got to share in it. That's a victory worth fighting for. So if you've got a Brenda in your neighborhood, remember to check the oldest maps you can find. Sometimes the best defense is a piece of forgotten history. Share your own HOA nightmare in the comments below. I read every one. And if you enjoyed seeing bureaucracy get a taste of its own medicine, be sure to subscribe for more stories of justice served.